sending out some gratitude for all of us being able to gather here today, those of us who have been able to make the journey, those of us who are able to pay attention, for all the resources that we've been given to be as present as we are in this moment. I thank you. And we call on all that is and may be within us and is given to us, that this teaching is given and received in a good way. I really think that what this chapter, the chapter I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on for this series, for our program of study of this book, it's really dynamite. It's really dangerous in the sense that something with a lot of power can do a lot of damage, and it can do a lot of good, depending on how it's used, depending on where it lands and how we put it into practice, which is the emphasis. Our principle 5 says that all the other 4 can't grasp them without being able to put them into practice. That's when things can get messy. God gives himself to man, and man has the power to make himself what he will. Freedom of will is man's inheritance, and he can use that freedom to build or destroy as he determines. It's a quote from Charles Fillmore's Keep a True Lent, and here we are at the beginning of Lent, starting this week on Valentine's Day, Ash Wednesday. And Charles Fillmore laying it down with that we have the power to build or destroy. In our theology, the power that we name with that 3 letters, God, is given into and through us. This is a challenging thought just to start with. When we unpack it, that's when I think it becomes that dynamite, that dangerous concept. I am God. The man J.C. himself got into a little trouble when he quoted that, as we recall from other talks up here. And that is the emphasis of the Fillmore's interpretation of Christianity, and it was powerful enough of an idea that it caught on and created some roots in the world, such as that we're here today, and we can say Unity Church, and people all around the world will know that there's something a little different about the interpretation, something powerful in using different ideas to unlock the mysteries of Scripture, of reality itself, when we come together to study and to hold space for one another, not just in our heads as we're reading, but our hearts as we're unfolding this stuff into our lives and seeing how it connects and seeing how it transforms us. And that's not always comfortable. It's dangerous to look into the mirror of ourselves and our reality with that thought that I am responsible for what I see, that I am a co-creator of my life experiences, as this chapter's affirmation urges us to consider. Now, the fact that it's co-creator is easy enough to get behind. There's a way of looking at it that everything is originating in me, that I am the full creator of all my experience. That's a bit hard to deal with. But to put it on the level that I am at least having a huge role in what I'm experiencing, in my perceptions, my responses to them, that much is uncontroversial, right? There are some very basic psychological mechanisms that we can see that when we're looking for trouble, we will find it. When we're looking for help, we're much more likely to see it. When we're tuning ourselves in to see what is good about a situation or what is possible about a situation, that has, in my experience and the experience of people I know in this room who have shared that in intimate moments with me, that is something that can happen and transform our experience of our lives in ways that we didn't expect. Because we can leave a door open to say that what I'm thinking of with my mortal mind, with my all too human perspective, is just one point of view. And that there are other points of view which may contain the medicine I need for that situation to look and feel and play out differently, because it changes the way that I'm showing up for it. For me, that's part of the payoff. That's why I do this work. That's why I do New Thought. It's because I have had that experience, and sometimes I don't know what to do, and I would like this to get unlocked for me. When I run up against these troubles, I'm not always thinking about it as being a benefit or a gift. Sometimes when we look into the world, it's really challenging to see how something might be for the good. It's hard to see why we would choose to manifest that. It's hard to take responsibility for everything we see in the world. Brummett says that his book is working from the premise that we're spiritual beings having that human experience, and that all of our suffering is a result of having identified exclusively with the humanity rather than the divinity of our nature. This is fully in line with Unity's styles, Unity's basic teachings. Brummett takes a more Buddhist approach and flavor to how he works that. He does warn us that in taking on infinite responsibility, if we don't go with wisdom, that this can hurt us. We're each responsible for our life is a terrible and awesome teaching. It's a strong medicine, and you can't just hand it out to the public at random. Can you? If we take medicine in the wrong way, it can not only just delay our healing, but it can really do harm. And yet we know that it does heal. Brummett tells a story, quoting from Buddhist scripture, about catching a snake, that if you try to catch a snake by its tail, it can turn around, snake up on you, and strike you. But if you get yourself a good long stick and catch it by the head, you'll have mastery over it. This is not a problem that most of us have, but the Buddha's audience clearly had different concerns on the day-to-day. And it's the same thing if you learn the words of a spiritual teaching, but not the purpose of it, or the meaning of it. If you're not in tune with its spiritual intention and you just learn it as words, it can snake around and get you. You have to grasp it in the right way from the head, or it can harm you. That's why he also used the image of a double-edged sword for this chapter. The responsibility for our life, if it is in our own mind that the cause and the cure for all of our conditions, then we are all in control of our own thoughts and our beliefs, and so therefore we're responsible for all of our suffering. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. It is not the most comforting message in our times of struggle. Not always. It can, when we are ready for it, when it comes in the right time, help us to see that we have the keys to our transformation, no matter what kind of situation we're enduring. That we aren't just victims of chance or other people's malice or machinations, but that because we create our conditions in various ways, there's a role we can play. There's always something we can do to shift the equation somehow. Sometimes that can seem really small. And for me, a lot of times I'm very practiced in saying, that's so small it doesn't matter, and then I don't do it. You know, like calling a friend just to talk about a problem. What good could that do? No one's ever had the experience of opening up to another person and finding themselves not alone, and suddenly the world can be a little different. I'm sure. I certainly am good at forgetting it. Finding that the phone weighs 10,000 pounds in those moments. But by getting new perspectives, we can see how we are capable of changing some aspect of our story. Brummett suggests we can take that as a thought exercise, if nothing else, to the extent that we are the author of our story in total from the beginning. If we take on that mantle of being the creator somehow of all of our experiences, there's a way that we can empower ourselves by seeing all the challenges we've been through, all the ways that we've grown to meet those challenges, what's happening to us now is just what we're looking at from this point of view. It looks at like from the edge onward, it's hard to see how that's going to take our story forward. But we can, with faith and with the strength to sit in that discomfort, know that there is wisdom available. And that's what I love about Unity's emphasis, that all is one, but it's only in the many that it can really be whole. All is one, that's great, I'm one with God. But without these different powers being able to line up, then that is a great teaching, but it could harm me, it could be useless. Understanding that it's with strength and with faith and with wisdom that this concept of responsibility helps me. That's what's necessary, because otherwise, if I'm one with all, won't I just get blamed for everything? How could I be on the hook for all the suffering in the world? And I can't. I don't find that Brumit has the tools to answer all the pain and objections that come up in my heart when I'm looking at this, when I'm looking at New Thought from this point of view. There's a lot out there. When I'm looking just at my own life, there's still the possibility of taking this teaching and hurting myself with it. Because if I'm responsible, then whatever suffering I'm going through, I did this myself. It's a great opportunity for me to open to shame and to guilt. That telephone doesn't get any lighter if I'm feeling shame and don't want to talk about how foolish I am. Brumit's solution, and this is why I emphasize that it's particularly Buddhist flavored, is that it's our attachments and our judgments about them that create the issue then. If we are infinitely responsible, okay, we've created suffering. The problem only comes when we judge that as bad. Well, pain is bad, or maybe it's good. Pleasure is bad, or maybe it's good. It's the judgment issue for Brumit that brings in our difficulty. We're creating it all the time. Everything is. God is, and I am. But when I start saying something is good or bad, then we have the issue of like, well, if I've created suffering, and suffering is bad, what does that say about me? Who am I that I've done this to myself, to the world? And personally, I find some help in this thought, but it's very intellectual to me. It's hard for me to enter into it. It feels alienating to be able to separate, and maybe that's the point, and maybe that's a lesson that I'm continuing to struggle with. But to take it to the point of saying that pleasure and pain are just facts, that they're just things that are happening, can be very medicinal. To say that satisfaction and unsatisfaction are just states that I'm experiencing. And whether or not I get the thing I want, or I'm experiencing the outcome that I tried to work for, is just something that's happening. I know that I can get information from that, but it's hard to emotionally be present for it. What works a little better is to put on that idea that, well, if I'm creating these experiences, there must be some purpose to it. I must like it in some way. When I'm able to sort of playfully engage with it, to say that I'm here to learn a lesson and I must have set myself up really well. This person, this place, this thing that's bothering me, I've laid it in my path so that I could find out something new about myself and about the world. To me, that's less alienating than the maybe Buddhist approach of saying that this is all just happening. It's all happening for my good. It's all happening because I am the architect of my experiences in a way that is leading me somewhere. And that everything that's bouncing off of me, coming back to me in this weird picture that I've painted for myself of my life in this world, is somehow a beautiful work of art. That's a lot easier when I'm just having a difficulty, in group life, in congregational administration, in workplace. It's harder when we're talking about politics, history, accidents of birth. In John chapter 9, as from it references, the disciples asked Jesus one of those hard questions for a New Thought audience. There's a man blind from birth, and as they're passing, they say, "Who sinned? Was it him or his parents? Because he's been blind from birth." If his, thoughts held in mind create after their kind. This guy must have messed up because he's blind. He's experiencing suffering. What did he do? Or was it his parents? Because it was from birth. Good one, right? It's the hard question when you're thinking in this frame of mind, in this viewpoint. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. It's a real succinct way to dodge the question, Jesus. And yet maybe that's all that's necessary on that level of the question. It's like, what are you asking that for? Why do you want to know what caused the wound? Why are you focusing on that instead of what can you do to cause the healing? You don't know how much it's nice to hear people nodding and saying yes to that, because it feels so unsatisfying to come up before you and be the teacher for the day and to have that to offer. I want to be able to have the medicine which is going to cure our problems. I suppose this is it. It's the gentle, quiet, consistent application of our principles in a very humane way, in a way that has spaciousness and forgiveness and acceptance that we are human beings having a spiritual experience and spiritual beings having a human experience. Without both sides, we wouldn't be who and what we are. And so as we take responsibility, we're called to look at that word itself, because Brahman acknowledges, and it was certainly one that I was happy to see at the end of the chapter, that there's some baggage around that word. Because to take responsibility or to be responsible, it's tied up with so many other relationships and other images and rules about how and who and what we're supposed to be. Being a child and being told that you're not responsible or that you are responsible can create some patterns for the rest of your life, right? We're still unpacking those decades later as we see how that meshes with the world and as we discover what it is that we can do in the world. We're still finding out how powerful we are, both in the ways that we are holding ourselves back and the ways that we can move forward. So letting go of some of the baggage around responsibility is a step that I found I needed to take to get a little more clarity and insight. Being able to say that I'm responsible for what I interpret my life to be, if nothing else, is an empowering step to take. And it doesn't require any mystical belief. Just to know that the way that you think about a situation, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right, is a great first step. Those of us who've been on the path of trying this way of thinking can tell you it gets freaky. There is like some mystical stuff that comes in, but that doesn't help you if that's not where you're at. It can lead you further in, and that's what you need a community and a tradition to hold space for. But sometimes it's just enough to know that there's a different way of looking at your problems and that you are able to do that work. Like Brahman says at the outset, being able to take that step is the first piece on the journey towards wholeness. Be responsible for your own healing. You have to want it and you have to believe it's possible. We know that it is. If you want it, that's up to you. So as we move from that heady space down a little further towards our heart and our meditation section here, I'm going to invite us to use the tools that Brahma has so thoughtfully collected in this project, this journey that we are on. I'm quoting Ernest Wilson, another Unity author. He says that everything we do or fail to do conditions its own response. What we send out tends to come back to us increased and multiplied like an echo. Action calls for reaction. Cause and effect are root and branch of the same tree. We begin practicing true responsibility when we acknowledge our responsibility for how we interpret and give meaning to each experience in our lives. Our future life experiences are conditioned by our responses to each experience in the present. Moment by moment, we build our futures from that present. So feel yourself wherever you are here, within your body and within this moment. Starting with gratitude for all that information that rushes to you as you quiet the mind and allow this time to say what it has to say. Wrap it all into the gratitude that you are aware and present for this journey and for the transformation. It is yours if you want it. When you hear that word, responsibility, and you think about your ability to respond, notice the fears and joys that rush behind as you feel that repulsion and attraction. What is it you want to take responsibility for in your experiences? And what is it that you turn away from? Those feelings of sympathy and antipathy for what your life story holds, and whether you want to claim them as yours or not. That's where the lesson is right now. It won't be forever. That's where the energy is. That's where the moving piece of your story is for you today. What did you create in those experiences? What don't you want to acknowledge as being yours? Finding clarity and peace with those questions, those answers, opens the door for something new to come through. Noticing what you're proud of, noticing what you're ashamed about. That energy that you're carrying can rejoin the energy of the all. Bless it and let it go where it wants to. And let it go and come as your story continues to unfold as you write it. I invite you to affirm with me. I am I am. I am.
I am
The co-creator
co-creator
of my
of
life experience.
my life experience.
I am the co-creator
I am the co-creator
of my life experience.
of my life experience.
I am the co-creator of my life experience.
I am the co-creator of my life experience.
And together and apart, we create ever onward. And so creation is unfinished and ongoing. Thank you for blessing it with what you have to give.